Good morning, everybody. My name is Rodney Fong. We're going to start in just a minute with this webinar series with Paul Ash of the San Francisco-Marin Food Bank.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I am delighted to have a colleague, friend, a community partner, and a true leader for many, many years in San Francisco, and that's Paul Ash, the Executive Director of the San Francisco-Marin Food Bank. Many of you have heard about the food bank. Many of you have volunteered at the food bank. And Paul has been in this space for a very long time here in San Francisco, and has actually been the director with the food bank since 1989, when we had the great earthquake. And so Paul has had the advantage of seeing many different things through San Francisco, tragedies, successes, downturns, upturns. And we began to think about what coronavirus means to San Francisco and how we will very likely be a resilient city yet again and rise from this. But an earthquake, a 9/11, a great recession, all these things Paul has seen and to some degree has grown the food bank as a result of each one of those movements. So I'm very excited to have Paul here. Maybe Paul will just start off by giving, if you can, our viewers a little history of the food bank, its great connection to the business community, as well as other nonprofits and who we really serve here in San Francisco.
Yeah, thank you, Rodney, and thanks to the Chamber for sponsoring and having this webinar this morning. Disaster preparedness has always been part of our mission and what we do, although it's not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to get food out there and feed people, but that mission morphs in time of disaster, whether it's earthquake or the recession, as you point out. And we have a special role during those times. And I think businesses appreciate that because we all have to scramble when there are unusual times and unusual situations. Even the beginning of the food bank grew out of a lot of support for business. I remember when I first joined, going out to so many business roundtables and discussions, and even the chamber, talking to business leaders about the need for a stronger food bank, because at the time we didn't have a large warehouse, the resources we need to feed more people. And the business community jumped in and helped us build the warehouse that we're in now. The property for the warehouse that we built was donated. And it kind of went on and on as other businesses pitched in and helped make that possible. So we have a long and really significant relationship and dependence, mutual dependence on the business community. Part of the dependence is the support that we get and also the volunteer corps that for so many years, right up until the edge of the coronavirus, where our volunteer base has shifted somewhat away from corporate groups. We've called on businesses to send people down to lend their hand.
I know that the chamber came in and was able to volunteer with our staff. And for anyone who hasn't volunteered at the food bank, it's actually a lot of fun. It's kind of this team building thing. Those who are slightly competitive start to put more carrots in the bag faster than your counterpart there. So for the Chamber of Commerce staff, it's a fun outing. I know that your food bank, San Francisco-Marin Food Bank, has distributed more produce per person in poverty than any other food bank in the US. And I want to talk a little bit about geographically where we sit, close to the center of agriculture, maybe in the nation, the variety of agriculture, the access. But also, it's the irony is that we have all these rich resources, and yet we have a community that is not accessible to the same kind of foods that everybody's accessible, even in a very rich, I mean that not necessarily financially, environment like the Bay Area. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how this last week with Black Lives Matter really shining a light still on the inequities of food accessibility?
Yeah, we were early as a food bank to recognize the value and actually the feasibility of an organization like ours handling fresh produce. The perishability makes it more expensive to handle. It makes it more risky to handle. If you've ever seen a truckload of produce that's gone bad, it's a very big problem. But we overcame those challenges in the late in the late 90s and really became a leader in the nation in terms of making sure that our distributions were rich in fresh produce. And we see that as one of the things we can provide the community. And you mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement and those that represent the need to reach deeply into those communities and provide food, make it available. And so that's what we'll do with fresh produce, really make sure that every corner of San Francisco, even if they don't have a full service grocery store or a place that they can go to shop, that they have a food bank outlet where they can come and farmers market style, at least up until the COVID crisis, farmers market style, choose the food, much of it fresh produce, that they want to bring home to their families.
Mm-hmm. Paul, and for those that don't know, there's the food bank on Pennsylvania Avenue, but then there's all these pantries, these remote satellite pantries that are set up over the weekend, some in community centers, some in churches, some in schools. San Francisco's in a very lucky position, and historically, and you've been part of this, to be on the cutting edge of a lot of different things, on the cutting edge of social issues, on the cutting edge of financial issues, innovation, technology. We are very lucky to have a Black mayor and a Black police chief right now. And they have spent their entire lives thinking about this moment. And I'm going to guess that they got involved in public service to be able to make this kind of change at this particular moment. If you had a moment with either of them, both of them, how do you think the food bank in San Francisco and Marin can set itself apart even further than it already has? How can it be more impactful? How can it partner with other businesses, other nonprofits, even the city itself, to really help distribute to the right folks at the right time, but not just in a COVID-19 response, but really ongoing? How do we make the city even cooler than it is?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity that we have, and certainly what I would tell the mayor and others, is that as we reach out to people with food bank resources, we can set up pantries in any neighborhood. We try to set them up in every neighborhood. But if we can also bring the services that the federal government provides through the state and through the city, like SNAP, or we call it here in California, CalFresh, that is really our big opportunity. California lags way behind the rest of the nation in getting people signed up for CalFresh benefits. And we leave millions of dollars, even as just a city, millions of dollars on the table by not getting folks signed up. We do some of that work trying to get people signed up, but this is really a city responsibility. A county and city responsibility to make sure that the systems work well. And we've actually seen some progress on that during the pandemic, because the federal government, followed by the state, have said, we're going to relax some of the restrictions and the hoops that we make people jump through to sign up for this benefit. And we're hoping that those things stick, that they're never rolled back, that we learn that being able to sign up on the telephone and not have to come down and sign documents or show people documents is something they do in other states. And we should hang on to that here in San Francisco and in the whole state of California. But that's our biggest opportunity. It's millions of dollars worth of food that people can get on an EBT card, so they can go into a business and spend their dollars and bring home the food that they want. It's a perfect complement to the food they can pick up at the food bank. It stimulates business growth. There's a multiplier effect in the community when people spend money in a supermarket. So we like that part of it. There's all sorts of reasons that we should want to grow this program to its capacity. It's not a program that has to be approved every year in the Congress. It is an entitlement. So we don't have to go fight for it every year. The money is there. All we need to do is sign people up.
And how do you think we do that? How do you think we broadcast that opportunity, either from the food bank or even to reach out to other networks that have the opportunity to share that information? Is that all communications, or is that a legislative?
No, I don't think it's all communications. I think we've had so many years of it being difficult for people to sign up for this benefit. that its reputation is somewhat tarnished. People think, you know, I know I'm going to have to wait in that line, and then I'm going to get a letter that says I have to come back and do this again, and then I've got to show them that, and we've made it hard, and so we're going to. I think the county is going to have to work to overcome that reputation of it being a difficult program to sign up for and to stay on, because the system can sometimes literally throw people out by, you know, if they don't get a letter that they're supposed to send a report in. You know, if we can make that easier, as other states have done by having online reporting and telephone reporting, we can start to chip away at that feeling in the community of eligible people that this isn't a program that's worth signing up for.
Mm-hmm. You know, I know throughout the years that we've known each other, and I've been following the food bank, the resiliency piece is so important, and to build that endowment so that you're not fundraising in the middle of a disaster or in a triage piece. So, you know, building that reserve to be able to operate continuously is important. Can we switch a little bit about unemployment and the newly unemployed or furloughed for now? We're looking at San Francisco of up to potentially 25% of our employee base being unemployed. Are you starting to see an uptick in who's using the pantries, who's coming to the pantries, and do you expect, in preparing for the worst case, that we may have more people in dire straits and deeper need than we think or fear?
We are, and actually distinct from the 07-08 recession, we've seen it from day one. I think people realize that this is a bigger economic difficulty than even that recession. And where in 07-08 we saw people slowly come to the food bank, maybe they waited until they really had nothing in their cupboard, nothing in their pocket before they came and asked for assistance. With this, I think we've seen people come to the food bank out of fear, not fear that they don't have food today, but fear that they better have a little in their cupboard, not let it get down to nothing. They've been more willing to reach out for help, which we are happy about. So we saw people literally the first and second week, coming to the food bank and asking for assistance. And it wasn't because they didn't have anything in the refrigerator then, just out of fear that it would be at their doorstep soon. And they wanted to maybe save a little money because they knew that the coming weeks and months were going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think that's really real. In this case, it's a fear and anxiety of what's next. And hopefully we're all beginning to feel a little more optimistic about things as we start to open back up. San Francisco has been very wise in shutting down early, and I think holding the shutdown so that we're sure and certain when we open we're doing it safely. Yeah. So that ramp back up is important. How do you think the food bank, or how is the food bank maybe going to adapt back to the Black Lives Matters piece a little bit, back to this new normal where maybe physically expanding the plant there, which I'm looking in your background, and if anyone hasn't been there, it looks like a Costco. But how are you going to, even the volunteering piece, that one room we have where there are 30 different people at one time stacking corn and potatoes, how are we going to spread out and take advantage of the outdoor space, the parking lot, the open air space?
Yeah, for some time, we've been sort of at our capacity at our location, 900 Pennsylvania. And we have been making plans as to how we expand. The plans that we're putting into motion now is literally building our warehouse out over our parking lot. And we've found other solutions to our parking issues. San Francisco is such an expensive city. We really can't afford to have an adjoining parking lot. We need to use that, get it under the roof, and make it available. And this expanded service, and we're serving 30,000 additional families right now than we were 3 months ago, has really signaled us that we're on the right track, and the need to expand is paramount. So we're going to be moving in that direction. Right now, we've thrown a tent up in the parking lot so the volunteers can work under the tent with a lot of physical separation. You're right. We can no longer work in those volunteer repackaging rooms, shoulder to shoulder. Now people need to be further away. Our volunteer corps has actually grown from, it dropped after the beginning of this, but it's grown now to almost 2x. What it was before, but as you note, it takes more space.
Yeah.
So we've rented additional warehouse space, and we're doing other things on a temporary basis, but ultimately we're going to need to have a permanent expansion that'll give us about 35,000 additional square feet of warehouse space.
Yeah, Paul, around the city, around the nation, the manufacturing industry, and to some degree, you are a logistics, storage, distribution, manufacturing, assembly business, is shifting a little more towards a 24-hour schedule, where there's maybe a very early morning shift that comes in, both for your employees, but also for volunteers, a midday, and then maybe even into the evening, a swing shift, just to spread out a little bit and utilize the square footage. Is that potentially a solution for you guys?
We have moved in that direction already, but I think you're right. It's going to continue, especially when you think about bringing in tractor trailer loads of food. Every driver wants to get into San Francisco early. They would come and go in the middle of the night if they could. We get our trucks in here, as early as 6:30 to unload, and that gives them a chance to beat some of the traffic and not have to fight their way out of town again. But I think you're spot on that we will be seeing ourselves unloading trucks at 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning. And so people will never even see the trucks. They'll be gone. I'm talking about the big tractor trailers that bring fresh produce and other items into town. They'll be gone before the normal business day begins. We already have a shift. We already have a couple people that come in at 2 a.m. And we have a shift that doesn't end to 11. So we're already open in some form, not a full shift, all but 3 hours of the day.
That's cool. So much of this, the solutions for COVID-19 are design and logistics challenges.
Yes.
We're seeing that in the restaurant industry, where there's a design challenge, taking over some of our streets for a shared street program, and finally utilizing the great open space and parks that we have. One thing I think that is different about San Francisco is the weather 24/7, 365 days, for the most part, is conducive to use the outdoor space. And so I begin to think about the annual gala that you have, the one big table, and how that is in the warehouse in your background. But maybe this year it'll be outside or in a tented space that's maximizing the outdoors.
Yeah, we're looking at all sorts of alternatives. We're in a better shape than many nonprofits that have had to cancel their annual event. I'm not sure we're going to be successful this year, but I think there will be a chance to return to that sooner for us, because we have big voluminous spaces like the warehouse where people can feel more safer and maintain distance from one another. So we're not quite back to that point, but I think we're in a better position than most to try to get there.
Yeah. One question here from the chat room, and if you have any questions, and for Paul or myself, how can my small business of 15 people help and become involved?
So many businesses of that size are really helpful for us. It's not just the large businesses that have been a factor in our success. We, for example, have a Food from the Bar, which is a really kind of a fundraising and friend raising and volunteering exercise between law firms in San Francisco. And we always measure that not only on an overall contribution, but on a per capita contribution. And many of the small firms just do a fantastic job and raise money and volunteer and raise food for the food bank. So size is not that important. People's enthusiasm and activity is what's important. So call us up, schedule a volunteer shift. We're not doing food drives right now because they're volunteer intensive to take that food and inspect it and get it back out. But volunteering and donating money are both activities that we need the community to help us with. So I would suggest anyone wanting to help, give us a call and we'll find a way to help you plug in.
Okay, great. One last question from me. From the Chamber of Commerce perspective, how can we help the food bank? Either by advocating for legislation that maybe at the local level, at a state level, or even at a federal level, how can we encourage our members to participate as volunteers to really understand your business? I think it's so important that these San Francisco institutions or nonprofits like the food bank and like the Chamber, that people really understand what they do. And in time of need is really when they step up. And so this is not going to be the last pandemic. This is not going to be the last emergency. And how do we build ourselves better and stronger so we can be more responsive on the next time around and coming out of this as well. But how can the Chamber help the food bank?
Yeah, two things come to mind. One is sort of in the time of disaster, when we go out as we are now with creating these pop-up pantries with 500 to even up to 1,500 people coming within a 4-hour window to pick up groceries. We create lines, and we're trying to get those lines down to more manageable sizes with appointment windows so people don't have to come and line up. But until we do, being around a food bank pantry, can be a little bit of a nuisance. So I would just ask your members, if you're in a neighborhood where there's a pantry, please excuse us and please, if you can, reach out and help. If there's line management issues, contact us in a positive way and say, hey, can you do it this way? That would be easier for me. So having just a dialogue with local businesses around places where we have these pop-up pantries is really valuable. We want to hear from people if we're causing problems. That's the only way we can solve them. In the greater scheme of things, I think, and I'm going to go back on this theme again, I think the business community and the people we serve and the food bank have a common interest in getting people signed up for CalFresh. It is an economic stimulus to a community when 95% of the people who are eligible are signed up for CalFresh. It helps small food businesses, it helps large food businesses. And the multiplier effect is about 1.25. So for every dollar that's spent on CalFresh, there's a significant economic ratcheting up that occurs because those businesses pay their employees and purchase goods and services to support their business.
Well, thank you, Paul. You have any other parting questions or thoughts about the food bank and how we can drive more donations, support the food bank, and how it expands going further?
Well, just another example, we have really super expanded our home delivery of groceries. We have so many seniors now are sheltering in place. We had a small program before this all started. 2,000 people were receiving a weekly grocery bag from a food bank volunteer. Now it's 12,000 people getting that weekly grocery bag. And some of those have been delivered just by volunteers. Some of them are groups of volunteers from businesses, but they're also from places like DoorDash, who are giving us some free deliveries, Amazon, even the little cruise cars, the autonomous vehicles that drive around and train themselves to be autonomous vehicles. They're coming by here first, picking up food, and then they have routing software that they go out and deliver it. So, those kind of business collaborations. And interestingly, we didn't think of that. They thought of it. They came to us. The business comes to the food bank and says, hey, we're driving around anyway. What do you need us to do? So, if the business community can keep their mind open to ways that maybe with not much additional cost, something they're doing could be valuable to us, we all benefit.
That's cool. That's cool to hear that delivery companies and autonomous car companies are involved. Hey, Paul, we're surrounded by a bunch of good problem solvers here in San Francisco. People who like a challenge, and let's hope that San Francisco takes advantage of that creativity, that ingenuity, problem-solving skills, and makes us a better city.
Yes.
We're gonna wrap this up, but Paul, I wanna thank you. You're incredibly hardworking, and your board and your staff is incredibly hardworking. Keep up the good work for the city. Be vocal. We will try to share the good word. As you're hearing, there are 30,000 new families that are using the food bank services, and 12,000 grocery bags that are going out, all within the last couple of months. So this organization has really stepped up and expanded its service. So thank you very much. The Chamber of Commerce, another nonprofit. If you haven't become a member or haven't checked it out, please ask you to do so. Go to sfchamber.com. You can join, you can follow some things, you can get plugged into other resources like the food bank, other great partnerships here in San Francisco. So if you haven't checked it out, please do so. And I want to thank Paul and thank you for joining our webinar series. We'll talk to you soon, Paul. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.